Hi everyone, I hope you're having a great weekend. I'm here to share with you a book review today, and this is on Ludovic Slimak's The Naked Neanderthal. This was first published in France, then late last year in the UK, and I do believe it is available in the US now. There are going to be some spoilers in this review, so if you want a undiluted view when you read this book, then don't listen any further. Otherwise, if you want my opinions, then carry on. I am reading this for Historathon 2024, which is a year-long reading event created by Vin over at Revenant Reads. The first quarter of the year, January to March, focuses on prehistory to AD 500. And I do love to read about Neanderthals, if you don't know that by now. So I have a selection of books, including this one that I have read for this event. So this book I will say, if you are new to Neanderthal studies, this is probably not the most appropriate book to pick up unless you augment it with other books, perhaps Rebecca Ragsyke's Kindred. This is more of an argument or a cautionary tale to individuals interested in Neanderthal studies about the direction of the perception that we're going with for Neanderthals. He's arguing that Neanderthals need to be understood on their own terms, and I'll share with you. I'll broaden this in more detail. I do have some notes here, so apologies if I am looking down from time to time. So as I mentioned, this is a cautionary tale or a rebuttal. He is not shy about not necessarily slating the community, but he is very concerned that there's this direction of portraying humans, Neanderthals, like humans. So I'm just going to give you a very brief history lesson if you're not familiar with Neanderthals, but I'm sure it comes as no surprise that Neanderthals have a very bad reputation as being dim-witted and brutish. And today, if you're called a Neanderthal, that is an insult, meaning just that. This perception of Neanderthals is deeply rooted. It has persisted for well over 100 years, and this is really thanks to the work of a geologist by the name of Marcelin Boule, who analyzed the bones of a Neanderthal from La Chapelle-aux-Saintes. We know now that this specimen was severely arthritic. However, he described this individual as bent over, dim, and then there were all of these negative connotations that came out of it that really gave it a bad reputation. And this has really biased studies of Neanderthals well up until very recently, which really precluded them from being understood as the advanced group of species that they were. So within the past 10-20 years, there has been an explosion of new artifacts, new sites, and new interpretations that really flip this understanding of Neanderthals. There's like a complete 180, and there's this direction to really try to understand them like humans. Their culture, their technology, their emotions, how they organize themselves. There is this direction in the community which is attempting to really stamp out that negative connotation of Neanderthals and really portray them like us. So Ludovic Slimak has an issue with this. And he is not shy about saying that this is kind of racist, actually. It's like, it's akin to in the 19th century when Euro-Americans tried to homogenize indigenous Americans by putting them in European clothing and make them like us. And he says this is harmful to Neanderthal studies. We're no further to actually understanding them by portraying them like us. So this is the point of the book. It's not meant to be an educational piece like other books out there. So Ludovic Slimak has over 3 decades of experience working with Neanderthals. He's the research director at a site called Grotte Mandrin in France, and he has a lot of dig experience in Europe and Siberia. In fact, he starts the book by saying you can really only understand Neanderthals if you have this level of experience, which for me at first when I was reading that, I thought it came across as exclusionary and a bit conceited. But as I read the book further, I realized quickly that he was trying to bolster his arguments and say, you know, I'm an expert here and I know what I'm talking about. And we really need to take a step back and look at the evidence from all angles. So I guess another point that I should bring up, around 13 years ago, 14 years ago, there was a paper, quite a groundbreaking paper that was published by Mark et al., which discusses the sequencing of the Neanderthal genome. And in this paper, they mention that 2% of our DNA, or for non-Africans, this the 2% derives from Neanderthals as a result of interbreeding. There's a paper that was released shortly after this, which does state that Africans do contain a small portion of Neanderthal DNA, but it's understood that this is the result of interbreeding with human populations that have interbred with Neanderthals in Europe, since there were no Neanderthals in Africa. And this paper is cited everywhere these days, and it's this paper that has really helped this perception of Neanderthals as being more human. And I mean, I've even cited this paper. I'm very much interested in understanding Neanderthals and interpreting the evidence in various different ways. So I suppose in one way I'm on the other side of the camp from him, but I nevertheless really respected and appreciated his arguments in this book. But I suppose what he's trying to say is there's so much evidence that is being interpreted one way. So there's a lot of artifacts that have been discovered recently, such as talons, bird feathers that have been systematically harvested, and shells with perforation. All of these pieces lend to this understanding that Neanderthals were engaging in some sort of ritual behavior, had art, and yeah, adornment is what I wanted to try to say. But he's saying, actually, could these be utilitarian pieces? And there's no strong evidence, he believes, that the perforated shells were actually perforated by Neanderthals. So could these be more utilitarian understandings rather than the ones that we have been interpreting it as? There's a lot of discussion about artifacts in Siberia, which are 10,000 years more recent than the evidence in Europe, which suggests that they died out tens of thousand years earlier. So he spends a lot of time talking about this as well. There's a lot of discussion about cannibalism. All of these discussions really, he just wants to showcase that it's there's a lot going on with Neanderthals that we can't really conceptualize because it's not necessarily fair to them to compare them to humans. But we can definitely see that they were certainly very advanced and had their own ways of being. So as I mentioned, I think there's quite a lot in this book where he's really not shy at putting himself at odds with other researchers in the field, and I admired this book for that reason. But like I say, there's a lot that I definitely don't necessarily agree with. However, I did very much enjoy this book, and I think it is a very fresh perspective, and I do think it's wise that we do examine the evidence from all angles. Um, there were some things that I wish would have been a bit different about the book. I would have appreciated in-text citations or footnotes rather than a list at the end, because there were certain things that I wish I could have referenced while he was making his arguments, but there is a list of references at the end. Um, and I do recommend this book to anyone who does want to read it. But like I say, if you're new, just be wary of the fact that you might not necessarily gain a lot from this book unless you've got a good base of understanding Neanderthals already. But yeah, I thought this was a good book. I like what he publishes in terms of his research, and I look forward to reading more by Slimak and all of the discoveries that he makes. So yeah, anyways, this was my book review. It was kind of all over the place, but yeah, hopefully you got something out of that, and I look forward to speaking to you next time. Oh, and if you are celebrating Mother's Day today in the UK, happy Mother's Day. Bye for now, BookTube. I will see you all later.